I thought it was just family. Who are these people? Happy birthday, Mother. These are your new caregivers. And that is why we are deciding it's best to sell the family home now. No. We need to discuss the house, Mom. House? You know a price? Well, yes. How could you know a price? Yes. File it now. The will. I'm ready. I'm ready. Do it.
On my 68th birthday, my daughter stood at the head of my dinner table, lifted her champagne glass, and announced that I was selling my house. Everyone applauded. I didn't. Rebecca smiled as if she had just given me the greatest gift imaginable. Mom deserves an easier life, she said. We've already found the perfect place for her. I had never agreed to move anywhere. Then I noticed the real estate documents beside my plate. That was when I understood this dinner wasn't really a celebration. My daughter had gathered 20 people to announce a future she had chosen for me. I said nothing. But before dessert arrived, I made one phone call that Rebecca would never forget. If you've ever had someone you love mistake your kindness for permission, tell me what you would have done. And if this story already has you wondering how far my daughter had gone, please like and subscribe. I'd also love to know where you're watching from and what time it is there. Sometimes it helps to remember that somewhere someone else understands exactly how this feels. 4 years before that birthday dinner, I buried my husband Richard Talbot on a cold November morning beneath an oak tree in Hollywood Cemetery. We had been married for 42 years. People sometimes assumed Richard and I had always been comfortable because of the house we lived in and the money we eventually accumulated. They never saw the beginning. When we married, we rented a one-bedroom apartment outside Richmond with a kitchen so narrow that two people couldn't open the refrigerator and the oven at the same time. Richard worked for a restaurant equipment distributor. I handled bookkeeping for a small construction company. We saved everything we could. Eventually, Richard came home one evening and said, "Connie, I think I can do this better myself." So we started Talbot Restaurant Supply with 2 desks, 1 delivery van, and more courage than money. I kept the books, answered phones, negotiated with suppliers, and sometimes drove deliveries when someone called in sick. Richard handled sales and built relationships with restaurant owners across Virginia. It took 30 years before anyone could call us successful. By the time we sold the company, we had employees who had been with us for decades and enough money to retire without worrying about every electric bill. That mattered to me because I remembered exactly what it felt like to count quarters at the grocery store. Richard never forgot either. Our house in Richmond became the symbol of everything we had built together. It wasn't a mansion, but it was beautiful red brick white columns, a wide front porch, and an old maple tree. Richard planted the year Rebecca started kindergarten. The house was worth around $850,000 by then. With investment savings and other assets, my estate was worth a little over $3 million. But I never walked around thinking of myself as a millionaire. I thought of myself as Richard's wife, Rebecca's mother, Madison's grandmother. Then Richard died, and suddenly the quiet inside that house became enormous. Rebecca stepped into that quiet almost immediately. At first, I was grateful. Mom let me handle that became one of her favorite sentences. When the banking app stopped working on my phone, Rebecca fixed it. When the water heater needed replacing, she found a contractor. When my doctor's office switched to an online patient portal, she helped me set up the password. None of those things seemed threatening. They felt loving. Rebecca was my only child, and after losing Richard, I suppose I liked knowing somebody was watching over me. She had built a successful career in real estate. She was organized, quick-thinking, and confident in ways I sometimes admired. Her husband, Nathan Brooks, worked in business management. They lived about 25 minutes away with their daughter, Madison. Madison had always been different from her mother. Where Rebecca entered a room already knowing what everyone needed, Madison asked, "Grandma, do you want help?" There is a world of difference between those two sentences. I didn't understand how important that difference was until much later. Over the years after Richard's death, Rebecca's help gradually expanded. She started reminding me about appointments I hadn't forgotten. She questioned contractors I had already hired. She sometimes called after seeing purchases from stores she didn't recognize. "Just making sure nobody's taking advantage of you, Mom." I usually laughed. I ran a company for 30 years, Rebecca. I think I can survive Home Depot. She would laugh too. But there were moments when something in her expression bothered me. Not anger exactly, impatience, as though my independence were becoming inconvenient. Still, she was my daughter, and we often excused behavior from family that we would immediately question from anyone else. A week before my 68th birthday, Rebecca called. I'm taking care of dinner this year. I thought we'd just have something small at home. No cooking on your birthday. I don't mind cooking. Mom. There was that tone, the one that made a suggestion sound like a decision. I surrendered. All right. But small, Rebecca. Of course. I mean it. You, Nathan, Madison, Diane. That's enough. Diane Whitaker had been my closest friend for more than 30 years. She knew Richard almost as well as anyone outside our family, perfect, Rebecca said. On the afternoon of my birthday, I stood in my bedroom deciding between two dresses. For reasons I couldn't explain, I chose the navy one Richard had always liked. You look elegant in blue, he used to tell me. I touched the small gold pendant he had given me on our 30th anniversary. For a moment, I could almost hear him. Then my phone rang. Rebecca, are you ready? I was born ready. Please don't drive. I'll send Nathan. I can drive, sweetheart. A pause. Fine, just be careful. That irritated me more than it should have. I had driven to the grocery store that morning. Still, I said nothing. I arrived at the restaurant shortly after 6. The hostess smiled when I gave my name. Oh yes, the birthday party. They're all waiting for you. She led me toward a private dining room. I heard voices before she opened the door. Then 20 people shouted. Surprise, I stopped. Rebecca hurried toward me, radiant in a cream-colored dress. Happy birthday, Mom. She hugged me. Behind her were Nathan and Madison. Diane waved from the table. But there were at least 15 other people. Some I recognized vaguely from Rebecca's real estate office. Others were complete strangers. Rebecca, I whispered. I thought we agreed on something small. Oh, Mom, relax. Everyone wanted to celebrate you. That wasn't true. Half those people didn't know me. A tall man approached and shook my hand. Rebecca introduced him as someone who specialized in helping older homeowners transition into maintenance-free living. Transition. The word stayed with me. Then she introduced a financial advisor I had never met. Another woman worked with Rebecca's brokerage. I glanced toward Diane. She raised one eyebrow. Diane had always been able to communicate entire paragraphs with her eyebrows. Madison came over and hugged me. You okay, Grandma? I'm fine. She studied my face. You sure? I squeezed her hand. Yes, sweetheart. But I wasn't. The seating arrangement bothered me next. Rebecca had placed herself at the head of the table. I was seated beside her, at my own birthday dinner. It seemed ridiculous to care about a chair, so I told myself not to be petty. Yet little things kept happening. People asked Rebecca questions about me, and Rebecca answered. Someone asked whether I traveled much. Not anymore, Rebecca said. I had returned from Charleston 6 weeks earlier. Another guest asked whether I enjoyed maintaining such a large home. Rebecca smiled. She's realizing it's becoming too much. I turned toward her. I am. She laughed as though I had made a joke. You know what I mean, Mom? No, I didn't. Across the table, Diane's expression had changed. She wasn't smiling anymore. Then the man who specialized in senior transitions leaned toward me. Rebecca tells me you've got a wonderful property. I looked at my daughter. She does. Rebecca reached over and touched my hand. We were just talking generally, Mom. I slowly pulled my hand away. Something was wrong, not dramatically wrong, not yet. But I had spent 30 years reviewing contracts, catching accounting mistakes, and listening to businessmen tell me not to worry about details they desperately hoped I wouldn't examine. I knew what it felt like when pieces didn't fit. And suddenly, too many pieces at that table didn't fit. The strangers, the financial advisor, the real estate people, the transition specialist, Rebecca speaking for me. I looked at Madison. She was watching her mother too. For the first time that evening, I saw concern in my granddaughter's eyes. Then Rebecca tapped her champagne glass with a spoon. The room quieted. She smiled at everyone. I want to thank you all for coming. Tonight isn't just about celebrating Mom's birthday. My stomach tightened. Rebecca lifted her glass. It's also about celebrating an exciting new chapter. And that was the moment I realized my daughter hadn't invited those people to celebrate the life I had lived. She had invited them to witness the life she had already planned for me. Rebecca kept her champagne glass raised for another second, smiling as though she had rehearsed the moment. Then a waiter entered carrying our appetizers and she lowered the glass. Actually, she said brightly, let's save the toast until everyone has settled in. A few people laughed. I didn't. Whatever announcement Rebecca intended to make could wait. What bothered me more was realizing that almost every conversation happening around that table seemed to concern my future, and everyone appeared to know more about it than I did. A waiter stopped beside me with a menu. Before I could open it, Rebecca leaned toward him. She'll have the salmon. I looked at her. I will. Rebecca blinked. You love salmon. I do. I also enjoy reading menus. The waiter hesitated, clearly wishing he could disappear. Rebecca gave a little laugh. Of course, Mom. I was just helping. There was that word again. Helping. For 4 years it had been the ribbon Rebecca tied around every decision she made for me. I opened the menu deliberately. I'll have the filet. Rebecca's smile tightened. Red meat. Yes. You told me your cholesterol was a little high. My doctor told me it was 2 points above where he wanted it, and then he told me to keep walking every morning. A woman across from us chuckled politely. Rebecca didn't. Fine, she said. Not, of course, not enjoy. Fine. It was such a small thing, but something inside me shifted. Later, when the waiter asked whether anyone wanted wine, I requested a glass of Cabernet. Rebecca immediately touched my arm. Mom, maybe not tonight. I stared at her. Why not tonight? You know, at your age, mixing things isn't always a good idea. The table went strangely quiet. I felt heat rise into my face. What exactly am I mixing? Rebecca lowered her voice, although everyone could still hear. Your medications. I take blood pressure medication every morning. Exactly. Which my doctor has never told me prevents me from having 1 glass of wine with dinner. I'm just looking out for you. I looked at the waiter. Cabernet, please. Yes, ma'am. When he walked away, Diane caught my eye from across the table. Her mouth was pressed into a thin line. She was angry. So was I. But beneath my anger was something worse. Embarrassment. Rebecca was slowly presenting me to that room as someone who required supervision. And the more I noticed it, the more examples appeared. A man from Rebecca's brokerage asked whether I still traveled. Rebecca answered before I could. Not much anymore. I turned toward him. I spent 5 days in Charleston 6 weeks ago. Oh, he said. Rebecca waved her hand. That was just Charleston. I almost laughed. Apparently South Carolina no longer counted as travel. Another woman asked how I managed living alone in such a large house. Again, Rebecca answered. It's becoming difficult. This time I didn't let it pass. For whom Rebecca looked at me. What you said, maintaining my house is becoming difficult. I'm asking for whom? She smiled. For you, Mom. Is it you complain about the yard? I complained that the landscaping company raised its prices. A couple of people laughed nervously. Rebecca's cheeks reddened. You know what I mean. Actually, I was beginning to understand exactly what she meant. She wanted the people at that table to see a particular version of me. Not Constance Talbot, the woman who had balanced payroll for 40 employees. Not the woman who had negotiated contracts worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Not the woman who had cared for her husband through cancer while still managing investments and household finances. She wanted them to see an elderly struggling alone in a house she could no longer manage. The frightening part was how easily people accepted the picture. Rebecca had always been persuasive. It was one of the reasons she was good at real estate. She could describe a cramped kitchen as intimate. She could call an outdated bathroom full of original character. And apparently she could turn an independent 68-year-old woman into a confused old lady with just a few carefully chosen sentences. Then came the stories about my memory. Rebecca was telling the woman beside her about Thanksgiving when she laughed and said Mom's getting terrible about remembering things. My fork stopped halfway to my mouth. What things? Rebecca smiled. Come on, Mom. No, I'm curious. She hesitated. Last month you couldn't find your car keys. They were in the pocket of my raincoat. Exactly. I found them in 3 minutes. Someone laughed. Rebecca continued. And you forgot Madison was coming over that Sunday. Madison looked up immediately. Grandma didn't forget. Rebecca turned toward her daughter. Yes, she did. No. I changed the time because my study group ran late. Rebecca's expression hardened for just a moment. Then the smile returned. Well, there have been other things. What other things? I asked. Mom, don't make this uncomfortable. I put my fork down. You brought up my memory in front of a table full of people I barely know. I think you already made it uncomfortable. Silence. Nathan stared at his plate. That bothered me. If Rebecca were simply being overprotective, why didn't her husband tell her she was going too far? Instead, Nathan looked like a man waiting for a storm he already knew was coming. Diane finally spoke. I'd trust Connie's memory over mine any day. Rebecca laughed lightly. Nobody's saying Mom can't remember anything. The senior transition specialist leaned forward. These conversations can be sensitive. Sometimes families notice changes before the individual does. I looked directly at him. And sometimes strangers form opinions based entirely on what they're told. His face changed. I certainly didn't mean I know. Rebecca touched my arm again. Mom. I moved my arm away. That was when Diane asked the question that changed the entire mood. So Connie, are you actually thinking about selling the house? Rebecca answered instantly. We've already discussed it. I turned my head slowly. No, Rebecca. Her smile froze. I continued. You discussed it. Nobody moved. The clinking of silverware from the main restaurant suddenly seemed very far away. Rebecca stared at me. Mom, we have talked about this. You've told me the house is too large. Yes. You've told me I should think about something smaller. Exactly. That is not the same as me agreeing to sell my home. Rebecca sighed. Not sadly. Impatiently. We're splitting hairs. No. We're distinguishing between your opinion and my decision. Madison looked down, but I saw the faintest flicker of approval on her face. Rebecca leaned closer. Can we please not do this here? I almost admired the irony. She had spent half the evening discussing my health memory house and future with strangers. But now that I disagreed suddenly, privacy mattered. You brought it here, I said. Nathan finally spoke. Maybe we should just enjoy dinner. I turned toward him. His eyes met mine for half a second. Then he looked away. That was the moment another piece clicked into place. Nathan, I said. He looked back reluctantly. Did you know about this? Rebecca answered for him. Know about what? I ignored her. Nathan. His jaw tightened. Rebecca's mentioned that she thinks downsizing might be good for you. That isn't what I asked. He shifted in his chair. Rebecca interrupted. Mom, you're turning this into something it isn't. I looked at my daughter. Then tell me what it is. For once, Rebecca had no immediate answer. The waiter arrived with my Cabernet and placed it beside me. I picked up the glass. My hand was perfectly steady. I took one small sip. Then I looked around the table. The financial advisor was avoiding my eyes. The senior transition specialist suddenly seemed fascinated by his napkin. One of Rebecca's colleagues was whispering to another. They weren't surprised by our conversation. They were uncomfortable because it wasn't going according to plan. That distinction mattered. I looked again at Nathan. He still wouldn't hold my gaze. And suddenly I knew. Whatever Rebecca was preparing to announce after dinner, Nathan already knew about it. Perhaps some of the other people did too. I was the only person at my own birthday table who had not been given the agenda. Rebecca straightened her shoulders. Can we move on? I smiled. Yes. Relief crossed her face too quickly. She thought I had surrendered. I hadn't. I simply wanted to hear everything. Because Richard had taught me something during all those years in business. When someone revealed too much too quickly, don't interrupt them. Let them keep talking. So I ate my filet, I drank my wine, I smiled when people wished me happy birthday, and I listened. 20 minutes later, when the dinner plates were being cleared, Rebecca reached for her champagne glass again. This time, Nathan didn't look at her. He looked at me. There was guilt in his eyes. Rebecca tapped a spoon gently against the glass. The room quieted. She stood. Now she said, smiling, I can finally tell Mom about her real birthday surprise. And every instinct I had developed over 68 years told me that whatever came next was not a gift. Rebecca stood at the head of the table with her champagne glass raised, wearing the confident smile I had seen countless times when she was trying to close a difficult real estate deal. Mom has spent her whole life taking care of everyone else, she began. Dad, me, Madison, her employees, her friends. I think we can all agree she deserves to finally let someone take care of her. Several people murmured their agreement. I remained still. The words sounded loving. That was what made them dangerous. Rebecca had always known how to wrap control in concern. She has this beautiful house, she continued, but those of us closest to her know how much work it has become. Diane looked directly at me. I saw the question in her eyes. Was that true? I gave the smallest shake of my head. Rebecca continued. So Nathan and I have been helping Mom explore some options. My fingers tightened around my napkin. Exploring options, I had explored nothing. Rebecca turned toward me with a bright smile. And I think we may have found the perfect next chapter. The senior transition specialist began smiling before she even finished. That told me he already knew. Rebecca gestured toward him. Michael has been helping us look at some wonderful communities where Mom wouldn't have to worry about maintenance, stairs, landscaping, security, any of it. Someone near the end of the table said, That sounds wonderful. Rebecca nodded enthusiastically. It really is. There's one in particular about 15 minutes from us. Beautiful grounds, dining, fitness classes, transportation, everything. I finally spoke. Rebecca. She looked at me. Yes, Mom. Why are you announcing this? A tiny crack appeared in her smile. I thought you'd be excited. About a place I've never seen. You've seen the brochure. No, I haven't. Rebecca hesitated. Well, you'll see it tonight. A few guests shifted uncomfortably, but Rebecca pressed forward. And of course, before Mom can make that transition, we'll need to deal with the house. Deal with the house. The house where Richard and I had raised her. The house where he had carried Rebecca through the front door after she was born because I was too sore and tired to manage the steps. The house where Madison had learned to bake cookies. The house where Richard had taken his last breath with my hand around his. Deal with the house. As though it were an inconvenient piece of furniture. Rebecca lifted her glass slightly higher. So the plan is to get the house ready for market while Mom starts thinking about her new place. There it was. Not maybe. Not if. The plan. A woman from Rebecca's brokerage smiled at me. You're in a fantastic market position, Constance. I looked at her. I am, oh, absolutely. Homes in your neighborhood are moving quickly. Rebecca jumped in. Especially one like Mom's. Another guest said, You must be thrilled. I looked around the table. Some of those people genuinely believed they were witnessing good news. Rebecca had apparently told them enough beforehand that my agreement seemed like a formality. My humiliation turned into something colder. How much, I asked. Rebecca blinked. How much what? How much are you planning to list my house for? Her eyes flickered. It lasted less than a second, but I saw it. Mom, we don't need to get into numbers tonight. You brought real estate professionals to my birthday dinner and announced that my home is going on the market. I think numbers are appropriate. Diane leaned back in her chair. She wasn't rescuing me. She knew I didn't need rescuing. Rebecca put down her champagne glass. Well, obviously nothing is final. What price? She exhaled. Probably around $875. I stopped breathing for a moment. Not because of the amount. Because of the precision. $875,000. She hadn't said somewhere in the 800s. She hadn't said we'd have to see. She had a number. I stared at her. How did you arrive at 875? Rebecca glanced toward one of her colleagues. It's an estimate, based on what comparable sales. Have you seen the condition of the roof? She paused. Yes. The upstairs bathrooms. Yes, Mom. The renovated pantry. Another pause. Yes. My voice became quieter. How Rebecca frowned. What do you mean? How do you know enough about the current condition of my house to price it? I've been there 1,000 times. Not since I renovated the upstairs guest bathroom. She opened her mouth, then closed it. The woman from her brokerage suddenly became very interested in her water glass. I looked at her. Have you been inside my house? Rebecca interrupted. Mom, don't interrogate people. The word hit me harder than I expected. Interrogate. Apparently asking who had inspected my property was unreasonable. I looked back at my daughter. Did you have someone evaluate my house without telling me? Rebecca's face tightened. It wasn't an evaluation. What was it, just an informal opinion? From whom, Mom? From whom? Rebecca. Nathan shifted in his chair. That was enough. Something had happened. Rebecca lowered her voice. You're making this into something ugly. No. I'm trying to understand why my daughter knows the probable listing price of a house I never agreed to sell. No one spoke. Then Madison touched my elbow beneath the table. Grandma. Her voice was barely audible. I turned. She looked frightened. Not frightened of me. Frightened of saying something. What is it, sweetheart? Rebecca noticed immediately. Madison, don't. That changed everything. I looked at Rebecca. Don't what? Nothing. Madison swallowed. I saw Mom in your office. Rebecca's face went pale. Madison. When I asked. About 3 weeks ago. I remembered the day. Rebecca had stopped by while I was gardening. She said she needed to use my printer. What was she doing? Madison glanced at her mother. Rebecca's voice sharpened. This is ridiculous. I kept my eyes on my granddaughter. Madison. She was taking pictures. My stomach dropped. Pictures of what papers? What papers? I don't know exactly. They were in the drawer beside Grandpa's old desk. I knew that drawer. Property records, insurance documents, old tax statements, a copy of the deed. I turned slowly toward Rebecca. Why were you photographing documents in my office? I was trying to help organize things. Did I ask you to? No, but did I give you permission? You don't have to make everything sound criminal. I didn't use that word. Rebecca's expression hardened. You're my mother, and in families help each other by secretly photographing deeds. Her eyes widened. I had guessed correctly. Diane whispered, Oh, Connie. The room felt smaller. I looked at Nathan. Did you know? He stared at the table. Rebecca answered for him. Leave Nathan out of this. That was answer enough. I pushed my chair back. Rebecca immediately stood. Where are you going? The restroom. We can finish talking. We will. I picked up my purse. My hands were steady, but inside me something was shaking. I walked out of the private dining room without looking back. The moment the door closed behind me, I kept walking past the restroom, down the hallway, past the hostess stand, through the restaurant's front doors. The evening air hit my face. I stood beneath the awning and opened my purse. My phone was inside. For several seconds I stared at Richard's photograph on my lock screen. It had been taken during our 35th anniversary trip to Savannah. He was laughing because I had complained that he never smiled properly for pictures. I suddenly wished more than anything that he were standing beside me. Richard would have known what to do. Then I remembered something he used to say whenever we faced a problem in business. Don't panic when someone shows you who they are, Connie. Pay attention. So I paid attention. My daughter had gathered strangers at my birthday dinner. She had discussed my health, my memory, my home. She had invited professionals involved in selling property and moving older people. She had photographed documents without permission, and she had obtained a remarkably specific estimate for my house. This wasn't an impulsive suggestion, it was preparation. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the name I wanted. Arthur Caldwell. Arthur had handled legal matters for Richard and me for almost 25 years. He had helped with the sale of our company, our estate planning, and the complicated paperwork after Richard died. More importantly, Arthur never treated me as though widowhood had made me incapable of understanding my own affairs. I pressed call. He answered on the fourth ring. Constance. Arthur. I heard papers moving. Happy birthday. I was going to call you tomorrow because I didn't want to interrupt your dinner. You aren't interrupting it. Something in my voice must have alerted him. What happened? I looked through the restaurant window. From where I stood, I could see part of the private dining room. Rebecca was talking rapidly to Nathan. Madison sat motionless. Diane was watching the door. Arthur, I need to ask you something. Of course. I took a breath. If I wanted to change my estate plan tonight, how quickly could it be done? There was silence. Not the silence of confusion, the silence of a lawyer who understood that the next question mattered. Constance, he said carefully, what exactly happened at that dinner? I looked through the glass at my daughter. I'm beginning to think Rebecca has been planning my future without waiting for me to finish living it. Arthur's voice became serious. Tell me everything. And standing outside the restaurant on my 68th birthday, while my daughter waited inside to serve me dessert, I began. Arthur did not interrupt while I told him everything. I described the strangers at the table, Rebecca answering questions for me, the comments about my memory, the transition specialist, the estimated listing price, and finally, Madison's revelation about the photographs in my office. When I finished, Arthur was silent for several seconds. Constance, are you somewhere private? I'm outside the restaurant. And Rebecca can't hear you. No. Good. Now I need to ask you something as your attorney, not your friend. Are you frightened of your daughter? The question hurt. No. Do you believe she's trying to physically harm you? Absolutely not. Do you believe you're being pressured to make a financial decision you don't want to make? I looked through the window again. Yes. That answer came easily. Arthur exhaled. Then don't sign anything tonight. I won't. And don't give anyone access to your accounts or property records until we know exactly what's happening. I understand. Then I asked the question that had brought me outside. What about my will? Arthur paused. Tell me what you're thinking. You wrote it. You know what Richard and I decided. I do. My current estate plan had been created after Richard became ill and updated after his death. Rebecca was my only child. There had never seemed to be much reason to complicate things. The house would go to her. Most of my investments would go to her. She was expected to provide for Madison and preserve what Richard and I had built. There were several charitable gifts, but Rebecca was the primary beneficiary. At the time it had felt natural. Now it felt reckless. Arthur, if something happened to me tomorrow, how much control would Rebecca have? Under the current plan. A great deal. That's what I thought. Constance, don't change an estate plan solely because you're angry. I'm not angry. That wasn't entirely true. I was furious. But anger wasn't what frightened me. I'm paying attention, I said. Arthur knew the phrase. Richard had used it with both of us. Then tell me what you want. I want to protect what Richard and I built until I understand what Rebecca is doing. That makes sense. And Madison's future shouldn't depend on Rebecca making good decisions. Another pause. No, Arthur said quietly. It shouldn't. I heard a door open behind me. Diane stepped outside. She didn't interrupt. She simply stood a few feet away. Arthur continued. We can revise the structure, but I'm going to insist that everything be done properly. I need to be satisfied that you understand exactly what you're changing and that you're acting voluntarily. Arthur, I spent 3 decades signing contracts larger than your first house. He laughed softly. There's the Constance I know. What can we do tonight? I can prepare the necessary documents and review every provision with you. Depending on the form we use, we'll follow the required execution formalities. I'm not cutting corners because it's your birthday. Good. What specifically do you want changed? I looked back toward the dining room. Rebecca was no longer visible. I don't want to disinherit my daughter. Diane turned toward me. Arthur said nothing. I love Rebecca. Rebecca, I continued. Whatever she's doing, she's still my child. I don't want revenge. Then what do you want? Boundaries? That word felt right. I wanted Rebecca to inherit something someday because she was my daughter. I did not want her assuming that someday had already arrived. Arthur and I talked through options. Instead of leaving the bulk of my estate directly to Rebecca, a substantial portion could be protected through a trust structure. Madison's interests could be secured independently rather than relying on her mother to pass assets along later. I also wanted to increase the charitable portion. Richard and I had once discussed funding educational opportunities for women who returned to school later in life. We had never formalized the idea. Suddenly I wanted to. Not because Rebecca deserved less, because my money represented my life. I wanted its eventual purpose to reflect my choices. Arthur asked question after question. Did I understand Rebecca would likely be upset? Yes. Did I understand the changes could remain in place, even if we reconciled? Yes. Was anyone instructing me to do this? No. Was Diane pressuring me? I almost laughed. Diane raised both hands dramatically. I haven't said a word. Arthur heard her. Hello, Diane. Hello, Arthur, he continued. Constance, I want you to come to my office. Tonight. I checked the time. Dessert hadn't been served yet. I'll be there. After ending the call, I stood quietly beneath the restaurant awning. Diane moved beside me. What are you doing? Something I should have done a long time ago, which is making sure love isn't the same thing as access. Her expression softened. Oh, Connie, I don't want Rebecca punished. I know. I want her stopped. Diane nodded. Then stop her. We went back inside. Rebecca immediately approached. Where have you been? I needed some air. You disappeared. I told you I was going to the restroom. That isn't the restroom, I noticed. Her eyes moved toward Diane. What were you two talking about? Diane smiled pleasantly. Your mother and I have been friends for 33 years. Pick a topic. Rebecca didn't appreciate that. I reached for my purse. I need to run out to my car. For what, my medication? You already took it. I looked at her. Rebecca froze. How would you know? I just assumed. That's becoming a habit tonight. Nathan stood. I can get whatever you need. No, thank you. Rebecca frowned. You're leaving your own birthday dinner for a few minutes. Dessert is coming. I'll be back before it gets here. That was my intention. Arthur's office was less than 10 minutes away. Diane drove. During the ride, neither of us spoke much. Richmond passed outside the window in streaks of evening light. I kept thinking about Richard. Would he think I was overreacting? Then I imagined someone standing at a table announcing plans to sell our home without asking him. Richard would have walked out before the appetizers. That thought almost made me smile. Arthur was waiting when we arrived. His jacket was off and his tie loosened, but several documents were arranged neatly on the conference table. He hugged me. Happy birthday. Not my most relaxing one. I've seen worse estate planning emergencies. I don't want to know. He smiled, then became serious. For the next 40 minutes, Arthur explained everything. He did not rush me. He made me repeat back the important consequences. The revised structure would reduce Rebecca's direct control over the estate. Madison's interests would be protected separately. Trust provisions would ensure that assets were managed according to instructions I established rather than according to Rebecca's financial circumstances. The charitable component would be expanded. Rebecca was not erased. She was simply no longer standing at the center of everything. That distinction mattered deeply to me. Arthur looked across the table. Last chance, Constance. We can stop. I thought about Rebecca as a little girl sleeping against my chest during thunderstorms. I thought about her high school graduation, her wedding, the day Madison was born. Then I thought about the documents beside my birthday plate. Love did not erase facts. No, I said. Proceed. Arthur completed the execution process with the necessary witnesses and formalities. When it was finished, he placed the documents into a folder. That's done. I looked at the folder. It seemed impossibly ordinary. Paper, ink, signatures. Yet my daughter's assumptions about the future had just changed. Diane squeezed my shoulder. How do you feel? I considered the question. Sad. Not triumphant. Not powerful. Sad. Because protecting myself from a stranger would have been easy. Protecting myself from my own daughter felt like admitting something I wasn't ready to admit. Arthur walked us to the door. Don't tell Rebecca tonight unless you want to. I don't. Good. First we figure out exactly how far she's gone. That sentence stayed with me. Exactly how far. When Diane and I returned to the restaurant, the dessert plates were being placed on the table. Rebecca hurried toward me. There you are. I was about to call you. I told you I'd come back. She searched my face. Everything okay? Behind her, a waiter set down a slice of chocolate cake with a candle glowing in the center. Everyone turned toward me. For the first time all evening, I felt calm. Rebecca thought she had organized my birthday. She thought she had organized my house. Perhaps she even thought she had organized my future. She didn't know that while she had been waiting for dessert, I had quietly removed the one thing she had taken for granted: control. I smiled at her. It is now. People began singing happy birthday. I looked around the table while the candle flickered. Then Rebecca reached beneath her chair. I almost forgot, she said. We still have your final present. She pulled out a cream-colored envelope. My name was written across the front. Inside, I could see the corner of a glossy brochure. Rebecca placed it beside my cake. You're going to love this. I looked at the envelope, then at my daughter. After everything that had happened that evening, Rebecca was still smiling. And I realized my birthday dinner wasn't over yet. Neither was her plan. Rebecca slid the cream-colored envelope toward me, as though it contained tickets for a vacation. Open it. Everyone was still watching. The candle on my chocolate cake had gone out, leaving a thin curl of smoke between us. I picked up the envelope. It was heavier than a birthday card should have been. Is this another surprise? I asked. Rebecca smiled. The best one. I opened it. The first thing I pulled out was a glossy brochure. Across the cover was a photograph of an elegant brick building surrounded by flowering gardens. Two silver-haired women were sitting beneath a gazebo, laughing over coffee. Cedar Grove Senior Living. Underneath the name were the words Independent Living, simplified. I looked at Rebecca. You've got to be kidding. Just look at it. I don't need a brochure. You haven't even seen the place. And yet apparently I'm moving there. Rebecca sighed. Mom, nobody said you're moving tomorrow. You announced it 20 minutes ago. I announced that we found an option. You announced that my house was going on the market. Several guests suddenly became fascinated with their desserts. Rebecca leaned closer. Can we not start again? I almost laughed. Start again. She had arranged the entire evening around decisions about my life, yet my objections were somehow the source of conflict. I opened the brochure anyway. The place looked pleasant enough. Private apartments, walking paths, a library, fitness classes, transportation, restaurant-style dining. If I had chosen it myself, perhaps I would have liked it. That was precisely the point. Choice. Rebecca seemed incapable of understanding that I wasn't rejecting Cedar Grove. I was rejecting the assumption that she could choose Cedar Grove for me. There's a 2-bedroom unit available, she said. It has a balcony overlooking the gardens. How nice! I knew you'd like it. I didn't say I liked it. Her smile faded. I flipped another page. Then something slid from inside the brochure and landed beside my plate. Several sheets of paper. Not advertising. Documents. I picked them up. Rebecca reached toward them. Those are just some forms. I moved them away from her hand. What forms? Nothing complicated. That sentence instantly made me suspicious. Richard used to joke that whenever somebody told us a contract was nothing complicated, we should start reading the smallest print first. I adjusted my glasses. The first page appeared to authorize Rebecca to communicate with certain professionals regarding my property. I read further. The language extended beyond simply scheduling appointments. It referred to obtaining information, coordinating property-related services, communicating with real estate professionals, and acting as a designated contact in connection with a possible sale. I looked up. You want me to sign this? It just makes things easier. For whom Rebecca exhaled sharply. Mom. No. Explain it. She lowered her voice. It means I can handle some of the preliminary details so you don't have to deal with 100 phone calls. I've been answering telephones since before you were born. That's not what I meant. What did you mean? Nathan shifted beside her. Madison stared at the papers. Rebecca tried another approach. You always say paperwork exhausts you. I said Medicare paperwork exhausts me. Medicare paperwork exhausts everyone. Diane covered a smile with her napkin. Rebecca noticed. This isn't funny. No, I said. It isn't. I continued reading. One section authorized the release of certain information to designated parties. Another allowed Rebecca to coordinate access to the property. That phrase stopped me. Coordinate access, Rebecca reached for her water. For inspections, photographs, things like that. I stared at her. So people have already been inside my house. I didn't say that. You knew the condition well enough to estimate a listing price. That doesn't mean anyone inspected it. Then why do you need permission to coordinate access? Because eventually somebody will need access. Eventually if I decide to sell. Rebecca's jaw tightened. Fine. I placed the papers on the table. No. She blinked. What no? Mom, you're not even giving this a chance. I gave it enough of a chance to read it. You don't understand what those forms are for. I looked at her. There it was. The sentence I had been waiting for without knowing I was waiting for it. You don't understand. I felt something inside me go still. I don't understand, I didn't mean it like that. Then explain how you meant it. You're upset. You're reading legal language when you're emotional. I spent 30 years reviewing purchase agreements, supplier contracts, leases, insurance policies, and employment documents. This is different. How Rebecca didn't answer. I folded the papers neatly and returned them to the envelope. I won't sign them. Her face hardened. Because Diane told you not to. Diane's eyes widened. I answered before she could. Diane didn't tell me anything. Then why are you suddenly acting like everyone is trying to steal from you? Everyone. I watched Rebecca realize her mistake. I had accused only her. She pushed her chair back slightly. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You're becoming so suspicious. Of people photographing my property records without permission. I was organizing things. Then why didn't you tell me? Because you make everything difficult lately. That hurt. Not because it was true, because I could hear the resentment underneath it. I leaned forward. Rebecca, who entered my house to evaluate it. Nobody evaluated it. Who gave you $875,000 as a probable listing price. My office knows the market. Did anyone from your office enter my home? Silence. Rebecca. Not formally. The words chilled me. What does that mean? She rubbed her forehead. Someone stopped by. A few weeks ago. Was I home? You were outside. I remembered Rebecca visiting while I worked in the garden. Someone else had been there, a colleague, and you took that person through my house without asking me. We walked through a few rooms. My stomach turned. While I was pulling weeds beneath the kitchen windows, my daughter had apparently been showing someone my home. My bedroom, Richard's office. Our family photographs, our private life. You had no right. Rebecca lowered her voice. I'm your daughter. That is a relationship, Rebecca. It is not a deed. Nathan whispered. Rebecca, maybe we should stop. She turned on him. Don't. That single word told me more about their marriage than I wanted to know. Madison suddenly spoke. Mom. Grandma said no. Rebecca looked at her daughter. Stay out of this. Why? Because you don't understand. Madison's expression changed. She had heard the same weapon Rebecca had just used against me. You don't understand. I looked around the table. The birthday atmosphere had vanished completely. The senior transition specialist had already excused himself. Two of Rebecca's colleagues were whispering near the doorway. The financial advisor was pretending to check his phone. Good. Let them be uncomfortable. I hadn't invited them. Rebecca folded her arms. I don't know why you're fighting me on everything, because everything belongs to me. That sounds selfish. For a moment, I genuinely couldn't speak. My house, my investments, my future, my life. And claiming authority over them was selfish. I thought of Arthur's office. The folder, the signatures, the trust structure Rebecca knew nothing about. An hour earlier, her accusation might have frightened me. Now it simply confirmed I had made the right decision. I pushed the envelope back across the table. I won't sign. Rebecca didn't touch it. You're making a mistake. Then it will be my mistake. That's exactly the problem. No, Rebecca. That's exactly the right. She stared at me. For the first time that night, there was no smile left. Only frustration, maybe even anger, and something else. Fear. That interested me. Why would my refusal frighten her? If this were truly about my comfort, disappointment would make sense. Fear did not. Diane rose. I think Connie has had enough excitement for one birthday. I'll drive Grandma home, Madison said immediately. Rebecca shook her head. No, we're not ending the evening like this. I stood. We are. Mom. I picked up my purse. I love you, Rebecca. Her expression softened for half a second. Then I continued. But loving you does not require me to sign documents I don't want to sign. I walked around this table. Madison followed me into the hallway. Grandma. I stopped. She glanced back toward the private room. There's something else. Her voice was trembling. What not here? I studied her face. She looked genuinely frightened now. Is this about your mother? Madison nodded. Partly. Partly. She swallowed. I heard Mom and Dad arguing last week. About me, about money. I waited. Madison looked toward the dining room door again. Then she whispered something that made the entire evening suddenly look different. Grandma, I don't think Mom wants you to sell your house because she thinks it's better for you. My chest tightened. Then why does she want me to sell it? Madison's eyes filled with tears. I think they need the money. The drawer Rebecca had photographed stood beside his desk. I removed every important document and locked them away. Then I placed an empty folder where the deed had been. On the front, I wrote one word. House. I closed the drawer. Rebecca thought my resistance was weakening. She had no idea that my trust in her was already gone. And this time I wasn't going to interrupt her plan. I was going to watch it unfold. For the next 3 days, I became the easiest mother Rebecca had ever dealt with. At least that was what I wanted her to believe. When she called Tuesday morning and asked whether I had looked at the Cedar Grove brochure again, I told her I had. I have to admit, I said the gardens are pretty. Her reaction was immediate. I knew you'd like them. I didn't say I was moving. No, of course not. But I could hear the smile in her voice. By Wednesday, Rebecca was calling twice a day. She sent photographs of apartments at Cedar Grove. She sent a floor plan. She even sent me a photograph of a balcony with 2 wicker chairs and wrote, "You could have your morning coffee here." I stared at that photograph while drinking coffee in my own kitchen, looking through the window at the maple tree Richard had planted nearly 40 years earlier. I wondered whether Rebecca understood the difference between convenience and home. Meanwhile, I was quietly protecting everything she thought she could reach. Arthur helped me make a list. Bank accounts first. I changed every password. Not because Rebecca officially had access to my accounts, but because over the years, she had helped me set up enough technology that I wasn't certain what she knew. My investment advisor added additional verification procedures. My bank was instructed clearly that nobody, including my daughter, was authorized to give instructions on my behalf. Then came my email. New password, new recovery settings, new security questions. I removed Rebecca's phone number as a backup contact. It felt strange doing these things, secretive, almost dishonest. Then I reminded myself that privacy is not dishonesty. I was protecting my information from someone who had already entered my office and photographed documents without permission. Arthur arranged for copies of important property records to be secured elsewhere. The originals I kept at home went into a locked fireproof safe. And yes, I changed the locks. That was the hardest part. The locksmith arrived Thursday morning. He was a cheerful man named Frank who talked constantly about his grandchildren while replacing the front and back door locks. When he handed me the new keys, I nearly cried. Richard had given Rebecca her first key to our house when she was 16. Home should always be somewhere you can get into, he'd told her. Now, decades later, I was changing the lock to keep her from entering without me. Frank noticed my expression. Everything all right, ma'am? Yes. I closed my fingers around the new key, just overdue maintenance. That afternoon, Rebecca came over. She tried her old key before ringing the bell. I heard it scraping uselessly in the lock. Then the doorbell rang. I waited several seconds before opening. You changed the locks, I stepped aside. The back lock was sticking. You didn't give me a new key. I haven't given anyone one yet. She frowned. What if something happens? I'll call someone. What if you can't? Then I suppose breaking a window remains an option. Mom. I smiled. I'm kidding. She didn't laugh. But she let it go because she thought she was winning somewhere more important. She walked through the living room slowly. You know, a lot of this furniture won't work in a smaller place. I looked around. My furniture. The large pieces. She pointed toward the walnut cabinet Richard and I had bought for our 25th anniversary. That, for example. What about it? You couldn't take it. Then I suppose it would stay here until I decided what to do with it. Rebecca touched the cabinet. I've always loved this. I stared at her. I know. If you decide to let things go, I'd take it. There was nothing outrageous about a daughter wanting a family heirloom, except I had not agreed to move, and Rebecca was already dividing my possessions. 10 minutes later, she did it again, the silver serving set, then Richard's leather reading chair, then a painting in the dining room. Madison might like this someday. I finally said, Rebecca, I'm not dead. She froze. I never said you were. No. But you're walking through my house choosing what everyone gets after I leave. I thought we were talking about downsizing. We are talking about thinking about downsizing. Her smile returned. Right. She had learned to correct herself. That was useful. People became more careful with words when they realized you were listening. Before she left, Rebecca stood in the foyer. I have someone I'd like you to meet. Who, a realtor? Aren't you a realtor? She laughed. I don't want to handle your listing myself. That could get messy. I almost admired the sentence. Apparently professional boundaries mattered now. Her name is Caroline. She specializes in homes in this area. What does she want? Just to walk through and give us an idea of what we'd need to do before listing. I pretended to consider it. When Saturday morning. That quickly. Let me think. Mom, it's not a commitment. I nearly smiled. Nothing was ever a commitment until Rebecca wanted a signature. Fine. Her face brightened. Really, Saturday? She hugged me. It was the warmest hug she had given me since my birthday. That hurt more than I expected. After she left, I called Arthur. She scheduled a realtor. When Saturday morning. Did you agree? Yes. Arthur sighed. Constance, I want to hear what Rebecca tells her. You're enjoying this too much. I assure you I'm not enjoying any of it. That was true. I just need to know whether Rebecca has represented herself as having authority over my house. Arthur became quiet. That's a reasonable concern. Will you come? Yes. I don't want you here when they arrive. Why? Because Rebecca will behave differently if she sees you. Arthur laughed softly. You really did run a company for 30 years. I've been trying to remind everyone. We agreed he would arrive 20 minutes after the appointment began. Then I called Diane. She didn't hesitate. What time? 10. I'll bring coffee. You don't have to. I know. That's why I'm coming. Saturday morning arrived bright and clear. I dressed carefully. Not because I needed to impress anyone, because I wanted to feel like myself. Navy slacks, white blouse, pearl earrings Richard had given me. At 9:45, Diane arrived with coffee and pastries. At 9:57, a black SUV pulled into the driveway. Rebecca stepped out first. A woman I didn't recognize got out from the passenger side carrying a leather portfolio. Rebecca rang the doorbell. I opened the door. For half a second, she looked at the new lock. Then she smiled. Mom, this is Caroline. The woman extended her hand. Caroline Mercer, it's wonderful to finally meet you. Finally. Interesting word. Have you heard a lot about me? Caroline smiled. Rebecca's told me quite a bit. I imagine she has. Rebecca quickly stepped inside. Caroline followed. Her eyes immediately began moving across the foyer, measuring, assessing, selling. Rebecca pointed toward the staircase. The bedrooms are upstairs. Kitchen was renovated about 7 years ago. Roof is newer. I watched her. She knew exactly how to present the property. Too exactly. Caroline nodded. And the owners are looking for a fairly quick transition owners. Plural. I didn't answer. Rebecca did. That's the hope. Diane looked at me over her coffee cup. There it was again. Rebecca speaking for me. But this time I let her. Caroline walked into the living room. Rebecca followed. The hardwood is original, beautiful, Caroline said. We'd probably want to remove some of the heavier furniture for staging. Rebecca pointed toward Richard's chair. That can go. I felt something sharp inside my chest, but I remained silent. Caroline took notes. The market is still strong. If we prepare correctly, I think your earlier number is realistic. Earlier number. So Caroline knew about $875,000. I stepped forward. What earlier number? Rebecca turned. We talked about this, Mom. No. You told me a number. Caroline looked between us. Confusion appeared on her face. I smiled pleasantly. Caroline, may I ask you something, of course? Who hired you? The room went silent. Rebecca answered. Mom. I held up one hand. I'm asking Caroline. Caroline closed her portfolio. Rebecca contacted me. Did she tell you I had authorized her to arrange this meeting? Caroline's expression changed. She indicated that the family was preparing for a sale. The family. Rebecca stepped closer. This is unnecessary. I ignored her. Did Rebecca tell you that I personally wanted to sell this house? Caroline hesitated. That hesitation told me everything. Then the doorbell rang. Rebecca looked toward the foyer. Are you expecting someone? Yes. Who? I walked toward the door. For the first time since my birthday, Rebecca looked genuinely nervous. I opened it. Arthur Caldwell stood outside carrying a leather briefcase. Good morning, Constance. I stepped aside. Perfect timing. Rebecca's face lost all color. Arthur entered calmly. He looked at Caroline, then Rebecca. Good morning. Rebecca stared at him. Why is your lawyer here? I closed the door. Because, sweetheart, you wanted to talk about my house. Arthur placed his briefcase on the entry table. And I thought. I continued, we should finally make sure everyone understands exactly whose house we're talking about. Maybe shame. Maybe the months of financial pressure Madison had described. Whatever it was, Rebecca stopped, choosing her words carefully. I'm your only daughter. Her voice filled the room. Yes. Who else is all of this going to? Nobody moved. Rebecca gestured around the living room. The house, the investments, Dad's things, everything. Who else is it going to? I stared at her. She heard herself too late. Her mouth opened, but no words came. There it was. Not concern, not safety, not Cedar Grove. Inheritance. Rebecca had begun thinking of my belongings as hers, because someday they might be. My voice was very quiet. You mean when I die? Mom, that's not what I… Yes, it is. No. You just asked who else gets everything. I meant eventually. Eventually. The word hurt more than I expected. Rebecca began crying. I didn't. Not yet. I looked at Arthur. Would you and Diane give us a few minutes? Arthur studied me. Are you sure? Yes. Diane squeezed my hand before following him toward the kitchen. When we were alone, Rebecca sat heavily on the sofa. I didn't mean it like that. I remained standing. Then tell me how you meant it. She covered her face. I waited. For years I had filled uncomfortable silences for my daughter. Not this one. Finally she looked up. You don't understand what's happening. Then explain it. I can't. Can't or won't. Her eyes dropped. That was when I understood something. Rebecca still believed the most important secret in that room belonged to her. She had no idea I had one too. She didn't know that while she waited for my birthday dessert, Arthur and I had already changed the future she thought was guaranteed. I sat across from her. Rebecca, there's something you need to know. She looked at me. I folded my hands in my lap. You keep talking about what happens to everything eventually. Her expression tightened. Yes. Well, I said eventually doesn't look the way you think it does anymore. Rebecca stared at me. What does that mean? I had imagined this conversation several times since leaving Arthur's office on my birthday. In some versions I was furious. In others I was triumphant. But sitting across from my daughter in the living room where I had once helped her with homework, I felt neither. I felt tired. It means I said you've been making plans based on assumptions that are no longer true. Rebecca wiped her face. What assumptions that this house will automatically become yours? Her expression changed. I never said automatically. You asked who else it would go to, because I'm your only child. Yes. And I'm not allowed to acknowledge reality. I'm still part of that reality, Rebecca. She looked away. I leaned forward. Do you care whether I want to live here? Of course. Then why didn't you ask I did? No. You told me the house was too big. You told other people I was overwhelmed. You brought someone inside without my permission. You found a senior community and announced my move in front of 20 people. I thought once you saw everything organized, you'd realize it made sense. To whom? To everyone. I shook my head. No. To you. Rebecca stood. This is unbelievable. Sit down. I don't need to be spoken to like a child. The irony nearly made me laugh. That is exactly what you've been doing to me. She stopped. I continued. At the restaurant, you chose my food. You questioned whether I could have a glass of wine. You told strangers I forget things. You answered questions about where I should live. Then you put authorization papers beside my birthday cake. I was trying to help. You keep saying that as though the word changes the behavior. Rebecca paced toward the fireplace. Everything I've done has been for this family. I watched her. Which family she turned. What which family, Rebecca? The one I'm still alive in. Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. I am not a bridge between your financial problems and my assets, I said. I'm your mother. Her face went pale. Madison told you. I didn't answer. She knew. Of course she did. Don't blame Madison. She had no right to tell you about our finances, and you had no right to plan around mine. Rebecca turned away. I gave her a moment. Then I said, there's something else. She looked back. On my birthday, when I left the restaurant, I didn't go to my car for medication. Her eyes narrowed. Where did you go? Arthur's office. The room became completely still. Rebecca stared at me. Why? You know why? No. I called him after Madison told me she'd seen you photographing papers in Richard's office. Rebecca sat down again. What did you do? Her voice was barely audible. I answered simply. I changed my estate plan. She blinked. Then she laughed. Not because anything was funny, because sometimes shock needs somewhere to go. You changed your will. Yes. On your birthday, yes. When before dessert. The color drained from her face. I remembered walking back into the restaurant and seeing the chocolate cake waiting for me. Everything okay? It is now. Rebecca had thought I was talking about medication. Now she understood. You changed your will because we had an argument, no. That's exactly what you did. I changed it because you revealed that my existing plan gave too much control to someone who had stopped respecting my decisions. Her eyes filled again. So you cut me out? No. That surprised her. What I did not disinherit you. Rebecca sat very still. I continued carefully. The previous plan left the majority of my estate directly to you. That is no longer the structure. What structure? A significant portion will be held and distributed through a trust according to instructions I've established. She stared at me. Who controls it, not you? The words landed heavily. What about Madison? Her interests are protected separately. Rebecca's face tightened. You don't trust me with my own daughter. This isn't about your parenting. It certainly sounds like it. It is about ensuring that money intended for Madison remains intended for Madison, regardless of anyone else's debts. That silenced her. I had struck the center of the problem. Rebecca looked toward the kitchen where Arthur and Diane were waiting out of earshot. Did Arthur tell you to do this? Number Diane, number Madison, number, then who? I almost smiled. Me. She shook her head. This isn't you. There are sentences children can say to mothers that reopen wounds from 30 years earlier. This isn't you. As if I existed only in the version she found convenient. It is very much me. Dad would never have wanted this. That hurt. But I refused to let her use Richard as a weapon. Your father wanted me protected. He wanted everything kept in the family. and it will be handled according to my wishes. Rebecca stood again. What else did you change? I increased the charitable portion. Her eyes widened. How much enough? To what programs Richard and I cared about. What programs one will support educational opportunities for women returning to school later in life. Another portion will support services for widowed women rebuilding their independence. Rebecca stared at me as though I had announced I was burning money in the backyard. You're giving away Dad's money. That did it. I stood. Stop. She froze. Do not ever call it Dad's money as though I wandered into his life after the work was finished. I didn't mean I built that company with him. My voice rose. I answered phones when we couldn't afford a receptionist. I did payroll at midnight. I drove deliveries. I negotiated leases. I sat beside your father through recessions when we didn't know whether we could keep every employee. I earned that money too. Rebecca looked down. I know. No. Tonight I don't think you do. I took a breath. Richard and I built our life together. He trusted me to decide what happened after he was gone. Rebecca sank back onto the sofa. So that's it. What you've punished me. No. You can call it a trust or estate planning or whatever legal term Arthur gave you, but you did it to punish me. I sat across from her again. If I wanted to punish you, I would have removed you entirely. She looked at me. I didn't. Why not? The question broke my heart. Because you're my daughter. Her face crumpled. I continued before emotion could stop me. I still love you. I still want you secure. I still want us to be a family. But love is not the same as giving you control. Rebecca cried silently. I wanted to cross the room. I didn't. Not yet. You took my age, I said, and turned it into evidence against me. You took my trust and used it to enter my office. You took a future inheritance and began treating it like present-day money. I was desperate. There, the first honest sentence. I waited. Rebecca covered her mouth. I didn't know what else to do. You could have asked me. I couldn't. Why? Because I was ashamed. Her voice broke. For the first time, I wasn't looking at the polished realtor who could sell anything. I was looking at my little girl. The child who used to hide failed math tests beneath her mattress because she couldn't bear disappointing her father. How bad is it? I asked. Rebecca shook her head. You don't want to know. I already know enough. No, you don't. Then tell me. She looked toward the kitchen. Not with them here, I called out. Arthur. He appeared in the doorway. Yes, would you take Diane home? Arthur studied my face. You sure? Yes. Diane came out behind him. She hugged me. Call me. I will. After they left, I locked the door. When I returned to the living room, Rebecca was staring at Richard's photograph on the mantel. He would be so disappointed in me. I sat beside her, leaving space between us. Tell me what happened. For nearly a minute, she said nothing. Then the truth began to come out. Nathan's compensation had been cut. The development investment was far larger than Madison knew. Rebecca had put in savings, then borrowed again. The project stalled. Interest accumulated. Their beautiful house had become another debt instead of security. We're drowning, she whispered. How much? She gave me a number. I closed my eyes. It was worse than I expected. Rebecca. I know. And your solution was my house. At first, no. She wiped her cheeks. At first, I was going to ask you for a loan. Why didn't you? Because I kept thinking we could fix it ourselves. And then I started thinking about what you had. Not what I needed. What I had. Rebecca looked at me. I told myself you didn't need that big house. I told myself Cedar Grove would be easier. I told myself if you sold, you'd have all that cash sitting there. And you thought I could give you some. She nodded. An advance. On your inheritance. Another nod. I stared at my daughter. The anger was still there. But now I saw what had fed it. Fear, shame, and entitlement. A dangerous combination. I started thinking, she whispered. It's going to come to me eventually anyway. She began crying again. I know how awful that sounds. Yes, I said. She looked at me startled by my honesty. It sounds awful because it is awful. Her shoulders shook. I reached over then and took her hand. Not to excuse her, not to erase anything, because she was still my daughter, and boundaries did not require cruelty. But now I said quietly, we finally have a place to start. She looked at me. The truth did not make me feel better. People like to say honesty is freeing, but sometimes honesty simply removes the curtain from something painful. Rebecca sat beside me on the sofa, staring at her hands. For most of her adult life, she had been proud of appearing successful. Now she looked exhausted. How much did you put into that development? I asked. She named the amount. I had to make her repeat it. You invested that much without telling Nathan. I knew about the first investment. The first, Rebecca nodded. When construction slowed down, the partners needed additional capital. We were told it was temporary. And you gave them more. Yes. From where our savings? I closed my eyes. And after that, a line of credit. Rebecca. I know. No, I don't think you do. She stood and walked toward the window. The projections were good, Mom. The location was good. Everything looked good. Until it didn't. Yes. That was the part of financial failure people rarely talked about. Bad decisions often looked reasonable while they were being made. What happened next? One of the partners pulled out. Then permits were delayed. Costs increased. Buyers started backing away. And you kept putting money in. I thought if I could keep it alive long enough, we'd recover everything. I had seen that mentality in business. People stopped asking whether an investment was wise because they became obsessed with recovering what they had already lost. How much does Nathan know everything now? Now, she nodded. I hid some of it at first. I felt another wave of disappointment. Why? Because he told me not to invest more. And you did anyway. I thought I could fix it before he found out. Rebecca laughed bitterly. I've spent the last year trying to fix things before people found out. That sentence explained more than she realized. The house, the birthday dinner, the documents, even Cedar Grove. Rebecca wasn't only trying to solve a financial problem. She was trying to preserve an image. Successful realtor, beautiful home, stable marriage, responsible daughter. She had become so afraid of admitting failure that she was willing to rearrange my life to hide hers. When did you start thinking about my house? I asked. She remained near the window. A few months ago. What happened? Nathan said we might have to sell ours, and you couldn't accept that. She shook her head. We worked so hard for that house. I stared at her. The irony was almost unbearable. You worked hard for your house. She turned. Yes. And therefore you understand why I might care about mine. Rebecca closed her eyes. I know how that sounds. Do you? Yes. She returned to the sofa. At first I was going to ask you for a loan. You've said that. I drove here twice intending to ask. Why didn't you pride? She wiped beneath one eye, and because I knew what you'd ask. How we got into the situation. You thought I'd judge you. I thought Dad would have. That hurt differently. Your father made financial mistakes. Not like this. You were a child. You didn't know about all of them. Rebecca looked surprised. I told her about the restaurant chain contract Richard had chased in our early 40s. He had expanded inventory before the contract was final. The buyer backed out. For almost a year we carried debt that frightened both of us. Your father barely slept. Why didn't I know? Because you were 12. What did you do? We cut expenses, sold one delivery van. I took over additional bookkeeping. Your father admitted he'd moved too fast, and we spent 2 years recovering. Grandpa never told me that. He didn't enjoy telling stories where he wasn't the hero. A tiny smile appeared on Rebecca's face, then vanished. If Dad were here, maybe I could have told him. You could have told me. I know that now. No, Rebecca. You knew it then. You chose not to. She lowered her head. I needed her to understand the difference. Fear explained what she had done. It did not excuse it. So instead of asking, I said you began calculating. She nodded slowly. You knew approximately what my house was worth. Yes. You knew what my estate plan said. Yes. And you began thinking that if I sold the house, I would have enough liquid money to help you. Yes. Then eventually became now. Her voice was barely audible. Yes. I looked at my daughter. Did you ever actually think I couldn't manage this house? She hesitated. That hesitation mattered. Sometimes. Rebecca. Not the way I told people. Finally. The full admission. I exaggerated. You lied. Yes. The word came out broken. I told Caroline you were increasingly overwhelmed because I needed her to deal with me instead of calling you. You used my age to bypass me. Yes. You told people I was becoming forgetful. Yes. Were you genuinely worried about my memory? No. That one hurt most. Not because I feared dementia, because my daughter had deliberately planted doubt about my competence. I turned away. Mom, give me a minute. She did. I stared at Richard's photograph. There are betrayals involving money. There are betrayals involving lies. But being portrayed as incapable by someone you trust touches something deeper. Rebecca had not merely wanted access to my assets. She had created a version of me whose opinions could be ignored. After a while, I faced her again. You understand why changing my estate plan wasn't punishment now. She nodded. I think so. Think harder. She flinched. I deserve that. This isn't about what you deserve. It's about what I need. What do you need to know that nobody can use my love for them as leverage against me? Rebecca began crying again. I became someone I don't recognize. I believed her. That was perhaps the saddest part. She hadn't woken up one morning and decided to betray me. She had crossed one boundary, then another, then justified each one because going backward would require admitting what she had done. I kept telling myself she said that once the development recovered, I'd repay anything you gave us. Anything I gave you. She nodded. I never planned to take money without asking. That doesn't make planning my house sale acceptable. I know. And if I had refused after selling, Rebecca looked ashamed. I don't know. Would you have pressured me? I don't know. Would you have told me I didn't need the money? She started crying harder. Probably. That answer mattered because it was honest. I took her hand again. Rebecca, desperation can make decent people behave badly, but entitlement lets them call that behavior reasonable. She looked at me. I was entitled. Yes. I thought because I was your daughter, because everything would eventually come to me. I had some kind of claim. You have a relationship with me, not a claim on me. She nodded. We sat quietly. Then Rebecca asked the question I knew was coming. Are you going to help us? I released her hand. With what? The debt. There it was. The moment where love and boundaries collided. I could write a check. It would hurt my finances far less than it would help hers. A part of me wanted to do exactly that. I was her mother. Mothers want to stop their children from drowning. But sometimes a person must learn to swim. I will help you find a way through it. Hope flashed across her face. Then I continued. But I will not erase it for you. Her expression fell. What does that mean? It means I'm willing to pay for an independent financial advisor to examine everything. Mom. It means you and Nathan will have to make changes. We already have. Real changes. Her jaw tightened. You mean sell our house? If you can't afford it, yes. She stood abruptly. So I have to lose my home while you sit here with $3 million. The words came out before she could stop them. We both heard them. Rebecca covered her mouth. I stood too. And there I said quietly, is the problem we haven't fixed yet. She shook her head. I didn't mean, yes, you did. I wasn't angry. That seemed to frighten her more. You still see my money as the solution to consequences you created. I'm scared. I know. What if we lose everything? You won't lose everything. How do you know? Because a house is not everything. She stared at me. You have Nathan. You have Madison. You have your health. You have the ability to work. You may lose the version of your life you've been trying to protect, but that is not the same as losing your life. Tears rolled down her face. I walked toward her. Rebecca, I love you. She looked at me. But love without boundaries becomes permission. She closed her eyes. And I'm not giving you permission to use me to avoid the consequences of your choices. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then the front door opened. Nathan stood there. He must have used Rebecca's car location or known she was here. His face looked gray with exhaustion. He glanced at Rebecca, then at me. I think it's time I told you my part. And from the look in his eyes, I knew Rebecca wasn't the only person who had been keeping secrets. Nathan remained just inside the doorway. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Rebecca looked almost frightened to see him. Nathan, what are you doing here? I called you 6 times. My phone was on silent. I know. He closed the door behind him. Then he looked at me. Constance. I'm sorry. I had known Nathan for more than 20 years. He was not an emotional man. At family dinners, he was usually the one who listened while Rebecca filled the silence. Now he looked like he hadn't slept properly in weeks. For what I asked. He glanced at Rebecca. For knowing more than I admitted. Rebecca stood. Nathan. No. It was the first time I had ever heard him use that tone with her. We've done enough hiding. Rebecca folded her arms. I already told Mom about the investment. Did you tell her about the house she knows? Our house, Nathan said. Rebecca looked away. I motioned toward the chairs. Sit down. Nathan sat opposite me. Rebecca remained standing for several seconds before finally lowering herself beside him. Nathan rubbed his hands together. I knew Rebecca was thinking about asking you for money. How long? About 3 months. And the idea of selling my house. His eyes dropped. I knew about that too. The answer hurt even though I had expected it. At my birthday dinner, when I asked whether you knew what Rebecca was planning, you avoided looking at me. I was ashamed. You should have been. Rebecca flinched. Nathan nodded. I know. Did you know she'd contacted Caroline? Yes. Did you know Caroline had been inside my house? Another pause. Yes. Rebecca turned toward him. You didn't know everything. I knew enough. That was more honesty than I expected. Nathan looked directly at me. I told myself it wasn't my place to interfere between Rebecca and her mother. That sounds convenient. It was. He didn't defend himself. I also knew that if you sold the house and helped us, our immediate problem might disappear. There it was. Not just Rebecca. Nathan had benefited from the fantasy too. You both began counting money that belonged to me. Nathan lowered his head. Yes. Rebecca whispered. Mom, we weren't trying to take everything. I looked at her. That's not the standard by which trust is measured. She said nothing. Nathan continued. I should have stopped it when Rebecca first mentioned Cedar Grove. Why didn't you? Because I was scared. So was she. I know. And somehow both of you decided your fear was more important than my right to make decisions. Nathan nodded. When you say it that way, how else should I say it? He had no answer. I leaned back. What happens if I give you nothing? Rebecca stiffened. Nathan answered. We sell our house, and we cut expenses. Rebecca stays out of new investments. I look for additional work or another position. We negotiate what we can and deal with the debt. So there is a path. A painful one. Painful isn't impossible. Rebecca shook her head. You don't understand what selling would mean. I turned toward her. You mean losing the house you worked hard for? She recognized her own argument reflected back at her. Yes. And what did you think selling mine would mean to me? Tears filled her eyes. I know. No. I need you to sit with that. She looked down. I wanted you to sacrifice your home so I wouldn't have to sacrifice mine. Yes. The room became quiet. Then I said I am willing to help. Rebecca looked up quickly. I raised my hand before hope became assumption. Not by paying your debts. Her expression changed. I'll pay for an independent financial advisor to review everything. Not someone connected to either of you. You'll show that person every account, every loan, every investment, every credit card, every obligation. Nathan nodded immediately. Rebecca didn't. I continued. You will make whatever lifestyle changes are necessary. Meaning sell the house, Rebecca said. Meaning stop protecting appearances at the expense of reality. Her face tightened. You make it sound easy. I don't think it's easy. You have no idea what people will say. That surprised me. People are friends, my clients. Everyone knows where we live. I stared at her. There was the deeper wound. You're afraid of looking unsuccessful. Rebecca looked away. I'm a real estate agent. What does it say if I have to sell my own house because I can't afford it? It says you made a financial mistake. That can destroy people's confidence in me. Or hiding it until you're destroyed can do that. Nathan looked at his wife. She's right. Rebecca turned sharply. Don't. No, Rebecca. She is. He leaned forward. We've spent a year pretending nothing changed. The cars, the club dinners, vacations. We're borrowing money to maintain a life we already lost. Rebecca began crying. I was trying to save it. I know. Nathan took her hand. But we can't. Watching them, I felt my anger soften. Not disappear. Soften. They weren't villains sitting in my living room. They were frightened adults who had made increasingly selfish decisions because they couldn't accept the consequences of earlier ones. That distinction mattered. But consequences still mattered too. If you want my help, I said those are my conditions. Rebecca wiped her cheeks. And if we refuse, then I still love you. She stared at me. But I won't finance the refusal. Her face hardened. So you can watch your daughter lose her home. Rebecca. No. You want me to learn some lesson. I want you to stop believing that every consequence is something your mother should prevent. I would do it for Madison. That struck me. Would you? Yes. If Madison secretly entered your house, photographed your financial records, told strangers you couldn't manage your own life and tried to sell your property to solve a debt she created, would you write her a check? Rebecca opened her mouth, then stopped. Nathan looked down. I don't know, she whispered. Neither do I. But I hope you would love her enough to tell her the truth. Rebecca stood. I can't do this anymore. Rebecca, Nathan began. No, she grabbed her purse. I came here and admitted everything. I apologize. I stood. Taking responsibility is not punishment. It feels like it. Sometimes it does. Rebecca walked toward the door. Nathan followed. At the doorway, he turned back. I'll call the advisor. Good. Rebecca glared at him. Do whatever you want. Then she left. The door slammed. Nathan hesitated. I'm sorry. Stop apologizing and fix what you can. He nodded. Then he followed his wife. I stood alone in the foyer. For the first time since Richard died, the house felt too large. Not because Rebecca had been right about it, because there was nobody in it. I walked into the living room and sat in Richard's chair. The anger that had carried me through the previous days disappeared. In its place came grief. Had I gone too far, I could save them. That fact tortured me. One transfer from an investment account could prevent much of what was coming. What kind of mother watched her daughter lose a home when she had the ability to stop it? My phone buzzed. Madison. Grandma, can I come over? I almost said no. Instead, I wrote, of course. She arrived 40 minutes later carrying takeout soup. You haven't eaten, have you? I smiled weakly. You sound like your mother. That's terrifying. Despite myself, I laughed. We ate at the kitchen table. I didn't tell her details about her parents' finances. She didn't ask. Eventually, I said, Your mother is very angry with me. Madison stirred her soup. I know. I could help them more. She looked up. Do you want to? I want to make the pain stop. That isn't the same thing. Sometimes 19-year-olds say things 68-year-olds need to hear. I stared at her. What if I broke this family? Madison put down her spoon. You didn't. You don't know that. Yes, I do. Her eyes filled with tears. You didn't break the family, Grandma. You stopped pretending it wasn't already breaking. I couldn't answer. Madison reached across the table and took my hand. For several minutes we sat there quietly. Then I understood something I had spent my entire life resisting. A boundary can feel cruel to the person who benefited from there being none. That does not make the boundary cruel. I squeezed Madison's hand. Thank you. For what? For reminding me that loving someone doesn't mean protecting them from every consequence. That night after Madison left, I stood at the front window. The maple tree Richard planted moved gently in the wind. My phone remained silent. No call from Rebecca. No apology. No good night. Nothing. Days passed. Then weeks. And for the first time in my daughter's 43 years of life, an entire month passed without her speaking to me. The first month without Rebecca was the hardest. I wish I could say I felt strong every morning because I had defended myself. I didn't. Some mornings I woke convinced I had done the right thing. Other mornings I stared at my phone and wondered whether being right was worth losing my only daughter. Rebecca didn't call. She didn't text. She didn't stop by. For 43 years, there had never been a month when I didn't hear her voice. Even when she went away to college, she called every Sunday night. Now Sundays came and went in silence. Once I opened our message thread and typed, "I miss you." I stared at those 3 words for nearly 10 minutes. Then I deleted them. Not because they weren't true, because I knew what I really wanted to write afterward. "I miss you. Tell me how much money you need." That was the dangerous part. I could still make the problem disappear. Arthur had helped me calculate what paying Rebecca's debts would actually mean for me. Financially, I could survive it. Emotionally, however, I knew exactly what the payment would teach. Push hard enough. Wait long enough. Mom will rescue you. So I did nothing. Diane refused to let me become a prisoner in my own house. On Wednesdays, she dragged me to lunch. On Saturdays, she invented errands. One afternoon, she appeared at my door wearing sunglasses and carrying 2 travel mugs. "Get your coat. Where are we going?" "You ask too many questions." I've recently learned questions are important. "Fine. We're going downtown, for what you'll see." She took me to a community center, where a local nonprofit was holding an information session for women returning to education later in life. I almost didn't go inside. "Diane, I'm 68, and I don't need to go back to school. Not everything is about you." That was Diane. Inside, about 30 women sat in folding chairs. Some were in their 40s. Others looked older than I was. A woman named Evelyn spoke about leaving school at 19 when she became pregnant. At 61, after raising 3 children and caring for her husband through Parkinson's disease, she wanted to finish the degree she had abandoned 4 decades earlier. Another woman wanted certification in bookkeeping after a divorce, left her financially dependent for the first time in her life. I listened. Something inside me opened. Richard and I had talked years earlier about helping women like these. Then life got busy. Retirement came. His illness came. And the idea remained an idea. After the session, I stayed behind. The program director asked whether I was interested in enrolling. "No," I said. "I think I may be interested in helping." That afternoon changed something. For months, my life had revolved around what Rebecca wanted to do with my money. Suddenly, I remembered that I could decide what I wanted to do with it. I began volunteering. Then I funded several small scholarships. I didn't tell Rebecca. I didn't tell Madison the amounts. I simply did it because it mattered to me. Madison visited almost every weekend. I was careful never to ask her for information about her parents. At first, she volunteered it anyway. "They're looking at smaller houses." I stopped her gently. "Sweetheart, you don't need to report on them." "I'm not reporting, I know. But I don't want you standing in the middle." She nodded. After that, we talked about school, her classes, her roommate, a boy named Trevor. She insisted was just a friend, which told me everything I needed to know about Trevor. Occasionally, however, information reached me without asking. Nathan called Arthur. They met with the financial advisor I had offered to pay for. Rebecca went reluctantly. The numbers were apparently ugly. The recommendations were worse. Sell the house. Sell Nathan's luxury SUV. Cancel the country club membership. Cut unnecessary expenses. Stop investing borrowed money. Rebecca hated every recommendation, but eventually they followed them. 3 months after my birthday, a for sale sign appeared outside their house. I didn't drive past. I didn't need to. Madison told me only after the house had gone under contract. Mom cried when they accepted the offer. I looked at her. "I'm sorry." She said she felt like everyone would know she'd failed. "What did you tell her?" Madison smiled faintly. "I told her selling a house isn't a moral failure." Smart girl. Your grandfather would have liked that answer. Their house sold. Rebecca and Nathan moved into a smaller place on the other side of Richmond. Not tiny, not humiliating, simply smaller. Nathan traded his SUV for a used sedan. Rebecca left the speculative development partnership and returned to focusing on residential sales. I heard she was doing well, not spectacularly. Well, there is dignity in well. By the fourth month, I began noticing something else. I was changing too. For years after Richard died, I had organized my life around absence. His empty chair, his side of the closet, his tools in the garage, his coffee mug in the cabinet. I had believed honoring him meant preserving everything exactly as he left it. But through the education program, I met women rebuilding their lives at 60, 70, even 80. They reminded me that continuing to live was not betrayal. I repainted the guest bedroom. I joined a walking group. Diane and I took a weekend trip to Charlottesville. I even moved Richard's chair, only 6 feet from one side of the living room to the other. But when I finished, I cried for 20 minutes. Then I laughed because I imagined him asking why it had taken me 4 years. 5 months passed. Still nothing from Rebecca. Christmas approached. I bought her a gift. A scarf. Nothing expensive. I wrapped it. Then I put it in the closet. She didn't come for Christmas. Madison divided the day between us. I told her not to feel guilty. I don't want our family becoming a custody arrangement. She laughed. But after she left that evening, I sat alone beside the Christmas tree and cried. Boundaries did not make loneliness painless. They simply prevented loneliness from making my decisions. A week into the 6th month, I came home from the community center and found an envelope in my mailbox. My name was written by hand. I recognized the handwriting immediately. Rebecca. I stood at the mailbox for a long time. Then I carried the envelope inside. I almost called Diane. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table. Richard's chair was across from me. Some habits I wasn't ready to change. I opened the envelope. 3 pages. Handwritten. No lawyer. No financial statements. No request. The first line stopped me. Mom, I finally understand what I did to you. My eyes filled. I kept reading. Rebecca wrote that selling her house had forced her to experience something she had refused to imagine on my behalf. She described standing in her empty living room after the movers left. For the first time, she understood that a house could contain a person's history. She wrote, "The difference is that I chose to sell mine because I needed to. I tried to take that choice away from you. I covered my mouth." She admitted she had been angry for months. At me, at Nathan, at Madison, at herself. She had convinced herself I was cruel because that was easier than admitting I had been right. Then came the sentence that mattered most. "I am not writing to ask about the will." I stopped, read it again, then continued. "I am not asking for money. I am not asking you to change anything. I only want to apologize without making the apology another transaction." I began crying. Not because everything was fixed. It wasn't. But for the first time, Rebecca was speaking to me without asking me to surrender something. The final paragraph was short. "If you never trust me the way you did before, I understand. But if you're willing, I'd like to see you. I want to listen this time. You can choose where, you can choose when. And if the answer is no, I will respect it. Love, Rebecca." I sat there until the afternoon light began fading from the kitchen. Then I folded the letter and placed it beside Richard's photograph. 6 months earlier, my daughter had organized an entire birthday dinner without asking what I wanted. Now she was asking me to choose the place, the time, and even whether we met at all. It was a small difference, and it was everything. My phone was on the table. I picked it up. For a moment, my thumb hovered over Rebecca's name. Then I called. She answered on the first ring. Neither of us spoke. Finally, Rebecca whispered, "Mom." I closed my eyes. "Hello, sweetheart." She began crying. So did I. After a moment, I asked, "Where would you like to meet?" There was a pause. Then Rebecca said something I didn't expect. "The restaurant." My heart tightened. "What restaurant?" "The one where I ruined your birthday." I stared out the kitchen window. Why there? Because I think I need to go back to the place where I stopped listening to you. I thought about the champagne glass, the strangers, the papers beside my plate, the humiliation. Then I thought about her letter. All right, I said, when I smiled through my tears. This time, Rebecca, I'll decide. And she answered with the one word I had needed to hear from her for 6 months. Okay. I chose Thursday at 6. For 3 days, I nearly changed my mind. Every time I pictured that restaurant, I remembered Rebecca standing with the champagne glass in her hand, while strangers applauded the sale of a house I had never agreed to sell. But Thursday came, and I went. I arrived 5 minutes early. The hostess recognized my name, but apparently not my face. Your party is already here. Party. I almost laughed. Rebecca was waiting near the entrance to the dining room. Alone. No Nathan. No Madison. No realtor. No financial advisor. Just my daughter. She looked different. Her hair was pulled back simply, and she wore black slacks with a blue blouse. No expensive handbag. No polished real estate armor. Hi, Mom. Hello, Rebecca. For a moment, neither of us knew whether to hug. She solved the problem by asking a question. Would you like a table in the main dining room or somewhere quieter? I noticed it immediately. Would you like? Not I reserved, not we're sitting. I looked toward the smaller dining room. Somewhere quiet. Okay. The hostess led us to a table near a window. Rebecca waited for me to choose my chair before sitting. Another small thing. But I noticed. A waiter brought menus. Would you like wine? Rebecca asked. I looked at her. She caught the meaning immediately. A faint, embarrassed smile crossed her face. I'm not going to tell you whether you can have it. Good, I deserve that. I ordered Cabernet. Rebecca ordered iced tea. When the waiter asked about appetizers, Rebecca looked at me. What sounds good? I almost said. You aren't choosing for me. But I stopped myself. If I wanted her to change, I couldn't punish every effort by reminding her of the past. The crab cakes. Those sound good. We ordered them. Then silence settled between us. Finally, Rebecca said I practiced an apology. I raised an eyebrow. That sounds ominous. She laughed softly. I had this whole speech, and I realized that was part of the problem. What was me deciding what needed to be said before I heard what you needed to say? That surprised me. So I'm not going to give the speech. What are you going to do? Tell you exactly what I'm sorry for. I put down my menu. All right. Rebecca took a breath. I'm sorry I spoke for you. Her voice trembled. I'm sorry I told people you couldn't handle your house when I knew that wasn't true. I listened. I'm sorry I made ordinary things sound like signs that you were declining. My throat tightened. I'm sorry I told people you were forgetful when I knew you weren't. That one still hurt. Rebecca looked directly at me. I used your age against you because it made my plan easier. She didn't say because I was worried. She didn't soften it. I'm sorry I brought Caroline into your home without your permission. She paused. I'm sorry I photographed your documents. Another pause. And I'm sorry I treated the money you might leave me someday as if it already belonged to me. My eyes filled. Rebecca continued. The worst part is that I convinced myself all of it was love. I said nothing. I kept telling myself I was helping you. But I wasn't asking what you wanted because I was afraid your answer wouldn't solve my problem. That is exactly what happened. I know. The waiter brought the crab cakes. Neither of us touched them. Rebecca folded her hands. When we sold our house, I was furious with you. I assumed. I blamed you every day. That must have been exhausting. A tiny smile. It was. Then she became serious again. I kept thinking Mom could fix this. Mom has the money. Mom is choosing to let me suffer. I felt a familiar stab of guilt. Rebecca saw it. But then something happened. What the movers left. She looked down. I was standing in the living room. The house was empty. You could see marks where the furniture had been. Her voice broke. I cried for an hour. I reached for my wine. And I thought about your house. She looked at me. I thought about Dad's chair, your kitchen, the maple tree, Madison's height marks inside the pantry door. I swallowed. I finally understood. Understood that I had expected you to give up a home full of 40 years of memories so I could avoid giving up mine. I looked toward the window. Cars moved along the street outside. People continued living ordinary Thursday evenings while something inside me loosened. The difference, Rebecca said, is that Nathan and I needed to sell because of choices we made. You didn't. No. And I tried to manufacture a reason for you. I turned back. Yes. She nodded. I know. We finally ate. The conversation became easier after that. Rebecca told me about their smaller house. We can hear the neighbor's dog through the wall. That sounds charming. It isn't. I laughed. She did too. Nathan had traded his SUV. Rebecca had canceled several memberships. They had begun following the financial advisor's plan. We still owe a lot, she said, but less. Good. I'm not telling you because I want you to help. I watched her carefully. I know. Her eyes filled. That means more than you realize. After dinner, the waiter asked whether we wanted dessert. My entire body reacted before my mind did. Dessert, Rebecca noticed. Her face changed. We don't have to. I looked at her. Yes, we do. We ordered chocolate cake, the same dessert from my birthday. When it arrived, neither of us touched it immediately. Rebecca stared at the plate. I ruined your birthday. You did considerable damage. She laughed through tears. I'm serious. So am I. She reached for her fork, then stopped. Mom, can I ask you something? Yes. Are you ever going to trust me again? I considered lying. Mothers lie to comfort their children all the time. Instead, I told her the truth. I don't know. Rebecca nodded. That's fair. I forgive you. Her eyes lifted. But forgiveness isn't the same as trust. I know. Trust took years to build, and one evening to expose how badly it had been damaged. She wiped a tear. I understand. And I'm not changing the estate plan back. The words hung between us. This was the test. 6 months earlier, Rebecca would have reacted immediately. She would have argued, asked amounts, demanded explanations. Instead, she nodded. I didn't come here for the will. I needed to say it. I'm glad you did. You're still included. Mom. But the trust stays. Madison's portion remains protected. The charitable plans remain. Rebecca put down her fork. Okay, just that. Okay. I studied her. You don't want to know how much no. Why? Because that's your business. I almost cried. 6 months earlier, my daughter had asked who else everything was going to. Now she was telling me my estate was my business. That did not erase what she had done. But healing isn't erasure. It is evidence that something new can grow beside the scar. Rebecca took a bite of cake. So is this where you tell me I have to earn my way back into the will? No. She looked surprised. You don't earn inheritance. What do I earn my trust? She nodded. How time? Anything else? Consistency. Anything else I thought about it? Ask. Ask. Before helping. Before deciding. Before assuming you know what I need. She smiled sadly. I can do that. We'll see. After dessert, Rebecca reached for the check. I put my hand on it. No. Mom let me pay. You paid last time. This is supposed to be my apology dinner. I looked at her. Then asked. She understood. Would you let me buy you dinner? I smiled. Yes. Her face softened. Thank you. Outside the restaurant, we stood beneath the same awning where I had called Arthur 6 months earlier. Rebecca looked at me. Can I hug you? That question nearly broke me. Not the hug, the permission. Yes. She wrapped her arms around me. For the first time in months, I held my daughter. Neither of us promised everything would return to normal. I didn't want normal. Normal had allowed too much to go unsaid. When we separated, Rebecca wiped her eyes. I love you, Mom. I love you too. Then she smiled. Call me when you get home. I raised an eyebrow. She immediately corrected herself. Would you call me when you get home? I laughed. Yes, Rebecca. As I drove away, I realized the restaurant no longer belonged entirely to my worst birthday. There was another memory there now. Not perfect reconciliation, not forgotten betrayal. Something quieter. My daughter had finally sat across from me without trying to manage my life. She had listened. She had asked. And when I told her the will would remain exactly as I had changed it, she had accepted my answer. For the first time in a very long time, the space between us didn't feel like a battlefield. It felt like somewhere we might build again. A year after my 68th birthday, I celebrated my 69th in the same house Rebecca had tried to sell. But almost everything about that birthday was different. There were no strangers, no realtors, no advisors, no speeches about my future. There were 6 people around my dining room table: Rebecca, Nathan, Madison, Diane, Arthur, and me. That was enough. More than enough. Rebecca had called 2 weeks earlier. "Mom, would you like to do something for your birthday?" I smiled when she asked. "What did you have in mind? Whatever you want." A year earlier, those words would have sounded impossible coming from my daughter. "I'd like dinner at home." "Okay, I'll cook. Would you like help?" There it was again, the question. "Yes, you can make the salad." She laughed. "After everything we've been through, I'm trusted with lettuce. Don't get ambitious." By 6 that evening, my kitchen was full of familiar voices. Nathan carried plates to the dining room. Madison stole pieces of roasted potato from the serving dish. Diane brought a bottle of Cabernet and announced loudly that nobody was allowed to question whether I could drink it. Rebecca groaned. "Am I ever going to live that down?" "No," Diane said. I laughed harder than anyone. That mattered. The memory no longer had the power to humiliate me. It had become part of our family history. Painful history, but history. Rebecca and Nathan were still living in their smaller home. Their financial problems had not disappeared magically. They had spent the year working through them. Nathan found a better position with a smaller company. Rebecca rebuilt her real estate business slowly. She stopped chasing investments that promised fast returns. She also did something I never expected. She began telling clients the truth about her own experience. Not every detail, but enough. When homeowners felt ashamed about downsizing for financial reasons, Rebecca stopped treating the move like failure. She told them a smaller home could represent responsibility rather than defeat. One afternoon, she called me after helping a 62-year-old widow sell a house she could no longer afford. I asked her what she wanted before I gave her advice. I smiled. "Imagine that. Very funny. I'm proud of you." There was silence. Then Rebecca whispered, "Thank you." Our relationship had not returned to what it had been. It had become better in some ways. More careful, more honest. Rebecca no longer had a key to my house. She had never asked for another. When she came over, she rang the bell. At first, that made me sad. Then one Sunday, she arrived carrying groceries and waited on the porch. I opened the door. "You know I said I could give you another key." Rebecca looked surprised. "Do you want to?" I thought about it. Not should I. Not would it make her feel better. Did I want to? Yes. Her eyes filled. Then I'd like one. The following week I gave her a new key. It wasn't the old brass key Richard had given her. That one remained in my desk. This was new. I liked that. Trust should not always be restored by pretending nothing happened. Sometimes it needs a new key. At my birthday dinner, Arthur raised his glass. "To Constance." I narrowed my eyes. "This better not involve senior living." Everyone laughed. Arthur smiled. "To a woman who taught several people in this room that estate planning can be surprisingly dramatic." "Several." Rebecca raised her hand. "I'm assuming I'm several." More laughter. Then Arthur became serious. "To living your life while it's still yours." That quieted the table. I lifted my glass. "I'll drink to that." After dinner, Rebecca brought out the cake. Chocolate. Of course. 69 candles would have required a fire permit, so there were only 2 number candles. Rebecca placed the cake in front of me. "No documents underneath it," she said. I laughed. I was going to check. Then she handed me an envelope. For 1 second, my stomach tightened. Rebecca noticed immediately. "Oh no, it's not paperwork. What is it?" "Open it." I gave her a look. She corrected herself. "Would you open it much better?" Inside was a photograph. It showed 5 women standing outside the community center where I volunteered. I recognized every face. All 5 had received educational assistance through the program Arthur helped me establish. On the back, each woman had written a message. Thank you for believing starting over has no age limit. Another said I thought my life had already been decided. You reminded me I could still decide it myself. I couldn't speak. Rebecca sat beside me. I talked to the program director. You did? She told me what you've been doing. I wiped my eyes. You weren't supposed to make me cry before cake. Sorry. No, you're not. No. I read every message. Then I looked around the table. Something became clear. Changing my estate plan had begun as protection. But it had become something larger. For years I had thought of inheritance as a straight line. Richard and I built something. Rebecca received it. Rebecca passed it to Madison. Simple. But money could carry values as well as names. My revised plan protected Madison. It still provided for Rebecca. But it also allowed part of what Richard and I built to help women reclaim their independence. That felt right. Later after, Arthur and Diane left. Nathan helped clean the kitchen, while Madison disappeared upstairs to take a phone call from Trevor, who apparently was still just a friend after an entire year. Rebecca and I sat on the porch. The maple leaves moved gently overhead. Mom. Yes. Can I ask about the will? I turned toward her. She smiled. Not like that. Go ahead. Do you still feel good about what you changed? I considered it. Yes. Then don't change it because of me. I studied her face. You're sure I spent too much of last year thinking inheritance was proof of love? She looked toward the yard. It isn't. No. If you leave me something someday, I'll be grateful. She took my hand. But I'd rather have you here. Those words reached somewhere deep inside me. I squeezed her fingers. You finally figured it out. Took me 44 years. Some children are slow learners. She laughed. We sat quietly. After a while, Rebecca asked, Have you ever thought about selling? I looked at her sharply. She burst out laughing. I mean, someday. Your decision. I laughed too. Actually, yes. Her expression changed. Really, I don't need 4 bedrooms forever. What would you want? There it was. Not what she wanted for me, what I wanted. Maybe a smaller house eventually, 1 level, a garden, enough room for visitors. Sounds nice, but not Cedar Grove. Definitely not Cedar Grove. And nobody puts a sign in my yard until I say so. Rebecca placed a hand over her heart. I have learned that lesson. I looked through the window at my dining room. Richard's photograph sat on the cabinet. For years after his death, I had been afraid that changing anything meant leaving him behind. Now I understood. A house could hold memories without becoming a prison. Maybe one day I would sell it. Maybe I wouldn't. The important thing was that the decision belonged to me. My birthday had taught me something I wished I had understood much earlier. People don't always take control from you with cruelty. Sometimes they do it with concern. Sometimes they call it help. Sometimes they say they know what's best. And sometimes the person crossing the boundary is someone you love more than almost anyone in the world. That doesn't make the boundary less important. I changed my will before dessert because I was angry and frightened by what I had discovered. But I kept it changed because once the anger faded, the reason remained. My life was still mine. My money was still mine. My choices were still mine. And loving my daughter did not require surrendering any of them. Rebecca rested her head against my shoulder. I'm glad you're still here, Mom. I looked up through the branches of the maple Richard had planted so many years ago. So am I, sweetheart. For the first time since my husband died, I wasn't thinking about what I would eventually leave behind. I was thinking about what I still had time to do.